They say sometimes the smallest moments can turn the tide of a life. A stranger pausing at the right corner, a word spoken at the right time, or in this case, a little girl sitting outside a closed bakery in the pouring rain. What happened that morning wasn't written in any news article, but everyone who lived in our quiet town remembers the day it began. And if you believe that kindness can still change the world, that one act of compassion can ripple farther than wealth or power ever could, make sure to like and subscribe, because this is one of those stories you'll carry with you long after it ends. It started on a gray November morning, the kind where the sky looked like damp wool stretched thin over the rooftops, and the air smelled of wet leaves and cold asphalt. The bakery on the corner, Sweet Haven, had been closed for months, its cheerful sign faded, and its once welcoming windows clouded with dust. But there, huddled under the awning with rain dripping off her red coat, sat a girl no older than 8. She had her knees pulled up to her chest, and her small hand clutching 3 crumpled dollar bills. Her name, as I would later learn, was Lily Carter. And though she looked like any other child waiting for a ride home, there was something about the stillness in her posture, the quiet defiance in her blue eyes, that made people glance twice as they passed. She wasn't waiting for anyone to pick her up. She was waiting for something far more impossible, for the bakery to open again, just like it had every Saturday before her mother died. Across the street, in a black sedan with tinted windows, sat a man who had no business being there. Elliot Sterling. The name meant different things to different people. To the business world, he was a billionaire recluse, the mind behind Sterling Ventures, a tech empire that turned data into fortune. To the tabloids, he was the ghost of Wall Street, the man who vanished from public life 5 years ago after selling his company for billions. But to me, and to everyone who would later tell this story, that morning marked the first time in years he stepped out of his car without a schedule, a speech, or a plan. He was on his way to inspect a new property deal, another cold transaction in a life defined by numbers, when his driver, a meticulous man named Harris, stopped at a red light across from the bakery. Elliot had been looking down at his tablet when he noticed her, that small figure in the red coat, soaked through, shivering but unmoving. He watched as cars splashed past, the girl's hair plastered to her face, her lips murmuring something to herself. He could have ignored it. Most people would have. But something in that image, maybe the stubborn way she kept her eyes fixed on the darkened windows, made him lower his scream. "Should I move along, sir?" Harris asked, glancing up in the rearview mirror. But Elliot didn't answer. He was staring at the bakery, remembering another rainy day, another small figure waiting for a door that never opened. His daughter would have been about that girl's age if things had gone differently. Without another word, he opened the car door, stepping into the downpour. Harris's protest was drowned by the sound of rain hammering against the pavement. The billionaire walked across the street, his expensive shoes sinking into puddles, and stopped under the bakery awning. The girl looked up, startled. "You'll catch a cold sitting out here," he said, his voice calm but distant. Lily blinked at him, uncertain. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm waiting." "For what?" "For them to open," she said simply. "They're just late." Elliot glanced at the boarded-up door, at the peeling notice that read closed until further notice. "I don't think they're coming back," he said gently. Her grip tightened around the wet bills in her hand. "They have to. I promised Mommy I'd get her favorite cupcake when it opened again." She pointed toward the faded chalkboard still hanging in the window, where the words "Lemon Cream Dream" were faintly visible beneath streaks of rain. That one, for a man who'd spent years surrounded by executives, lawyers, and contracts, Elliot Sterling found himself speechless. The way she said it, like a vow carved into the cold morning air, caught something inside him off guard. He knelt down, ignoring the rain soaking his coat. "What's your name?" "Lily." "Well, Lily," he said after a pause, "what if we could make it open again?" She frowned, unsure if it was a joke. "You can't. You're not the owner." "No," he admitted, standing. "But maybe I know someone who could help." He glanced back at his car, where Harris waited impatiently, and for the first time in a long while, Elliot felt the pull of something that wasn't profit or obligation. It was purpose. He handed Lily his umbrella, its handle gleaming like black glass. "Keep this for now," he said. "I'll be back." And then he left her there, a billionaire in a rain-soaked coat walking away from his chauffeured car, not realizing that a single promise to a child would soon rewrite everything he thought he knew about worth, loss, and the quiet power of keeping one's word. That was the morning it all began. The morning a man who had everything met a girl who had almost nothing, and somehow, in that fragile space between them, something extraordinary started to grow. No one in town noticed when the sold sign appeared on the boarded-up bakery 2 weeks later. It was the sort of thing people had stopped caring about. Another empty storefront in a quiet Massachusetts town where small dreams went to die. But early each morning, before the sun climbed over the foggy rooftops, a few curious residents began to notice lights flickering inside Sweet Haven Bakery again. At first, they thought it was vandals or squatters. Then came the sound of hammers, the scent of fresh paint, and the unmistakable sweetness of vanilla and sugar drifting through the air. The mystery quickly became gossip, and gossip turned into wonder. Someone was bringing the bakery back to life, but no one knew who. All anyone could say for certain was that a tall man in a gray coat had been seen stepping inside late at night, talking quietly with contractors, always leaving before dawn. That man, of course, was Elliot Sterling, but he didn't want anyone to know. After meeting Lily in the rain, something inside him had shifted, a thread pulled loose from the fabric of a life too tightly controlled. He couldn't stop thinking about her face, those blue eyes full of belief that the world still kept promises. He had built companies, moved markets, changed industries, but he'd long forgotten what it felt like to build something for the sake of hope. So he bought Sweet Haven Bakery through one of his shell companies, told his lawyers not to ask questions, and began what he quietly called Project Haven. His plan was simple and impossible all at once. Reopen the bakery exactly as Lily remembered it, down to the chalkboard menu and the bell above the door. He tracked down the retired owner, a kind old woman named Mrs. Pearson, who'd closed shop after her husband's death. When Elliot showed her the picture he'd found online, a photo of Lily's late mother, Claire Carter, smiling in that very bakery years earlier, Mrs. Pearson cried. She agreed to help, not for money, but for sentiment. She used to come here every Saturday, Mrs. Pearson said softly. Always ordered the lemon cream dream. Said it reminded her of home. Elliot nodded, staring at the faded photograph longer than he meant to. Then that's the one we'll start with. While the work continued in secret, Lily passed the bakery each afternoon on her walk home from school. She always stopped, peering through the cracks in the wooden boards, whispering a small greeting to her mother as if she were just inside. Her aunt, worn down from double shifts, scolded her gently. "Sweetheart, the bakery's gone. You can't wait for things that don't come back." But Lily didn't argue. She just smiled and said, "Maybe it just needs a little help." When the grand reopening notice appeared, handwritten in looping gold ink on the front window, the town was stunned. Sweet Haven Bakery, Saturday, 10 a.m. No fancy logos, no business names, no owner listed. Just the promise of something returning. That morning, Lily arrived early, clutching a small daisy from her mother's old garden, her red coat buttoned tight against the wind. She placed the flower on the doorstep and waited. Then, at exactly 10, the doors opened. Warm light spilled out, golden and soft. The smell of fresh pastries filled the air, and Mrs. Pearson herself stood behind the counter, smiling through tears. "Welcome back, sweetheart," she said. Lily stepped inside, her eyes wide. Everything was exactly as it had been. The pastel walls, the little tables with white lace cloths, the bell that chimed softly when she entered. And on the counter, under a glass dome, sat a single cupcake topped with lemon cream and a curl of candied zest. A small card beside it read, "For Lily, from a friend." Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. "Mom would have loved this," she whispered. When she bit into the cupcake, the sweetness brought tears to her eyes. It tasted like memory and sunshine. Outside, across the street, a black sedan idled at the curb. Inside sat Elliot Sterling, watching through the rain-specked window. For the first time in years, the coldness behind his eyes softened. "You kept your promise," he murmured quietly, though the girl couldn't hear him. By evening, word had spread. The bakery was open, and a new plaque gleamed near the register. "Reopened in loving memory of Claire Carter. May her sweetness live on." No one knew who would pay for it, but tucked in the office drawer, beneath invoices and supply lists, Mrs. Pearson later found a note written in neat, deliberate script, for a promise kept by a little girl who believed. Yes. By spring, Sweet Haven Bakery had become more than a shop. It was the beating heart of the town again. Families filled its sunlit tables. Laughter replaced the hush that once haunted Main Street, and children pressed their noses to the glass just to watch Mrs. Pearson frost cupcakes with the precision of an artist. At the center of it all was Lily, now the bakery's unofficial helper, handing out napkins, ringing the tiny brass bell above the door, and reminding everyone who came in that some promises are worth keeping. The bakery's success caught the attention of local news. Anonymous donor revives beloved shop, honors late mother. And no reporters tried to uncover who had funded it. No one ever managed to trace it back to Elliot Sterling. That was how he wanted it. The satisfaction came not from recognition, but from watching something pure and small thrive in a world obsessed with profit margins. Through his quiet foundation, Elliot went even further. He set up the Haven Fund in the bakery's name, scholarships for children who'd lost a parent, grants for single mothers starting small businesses, and emergency aid for families living paycheck to paycheck. Each initiative bore the same inscription carved into a small wooden plaque, for those who keep believing, even when doors stay closed. Yet Elliot himself never returned to the bakery during business hours. He preferred to visit in the early mornings before sunrise, when the streets were empty and the lights inside glowed softly through the windows. He'd stand across the street with a cup of coffee, watching Lily arrange flowers by the register, or wipe crumbs from the counter with a focus that reminded him of someone he used to be. Sometimes, he'd leave a small envelope under the door, not money, but handwritten notes encouraging her. Your mother would be proud. Keep the light on. You never know who might need it. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Lily noticed a familiar figure entering the bakery for the first time. A tall man in a gray coat, hair streaked with silver, carrying a single sunflower. She didn't recognize him, but something in his smile felt familiar, like the warmth of a story she'd heard long ago. He bought one cupcake, lemon cream dream, and placed the flower beside her mother's plaque. Your mom had good taste, he said quietly. When Lily offered to let him have it for free, he shook his head and slipped something into the donation jar. It wasn't until closing time that Mrs. Pearson realized it wasn't a check, it was a deed. The building now belonged entirely to the Haven Fund. Months later, when the truth finally came out in a small newspaper article that the mysterious benefactor was billionaire Elliot Sterling, people were stunned. But when asked why he did it, he gave a simple answer that silenced every question. Because a little girl reminded me that promises are meant to be kept, and that some hearts are richer than any fortune. From that day on, every time it rained, Lily placed an umbrella by the bakery door, black, polished, and always waiting, just in case someone else out there needed to be reminded that even in the coldest storms, kindness can still open a closed door.